This is the story of a man named Stanley.
If this all sounds like highbrow rumination, don't worry. Despite having plenty of commentary, the Stanley Parable is primarily concerned with providing a good time. No! A lot of video games try to answer questions, such as how to improve storytelling, evolve a genre, or create a new genre. The Stanley Parable only raises questions through seemingly endless satire. With incisive wit, the Stanley Parable explores numerous game conventions by turning them on their head and having a good laugh at them. The probing never gets too heavy-handed and remains lighthearted enough that it's enjoyable even if you don't care about the subtext. Both subtle and extravagant, the Stanley Parable is a delightful experiment.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
The original Stanley Parable started as a source mod in 2011, and while this new incarnation shares similarities with its previous self, much of it has evolved or expanded. What the 2013 version does share in common is its opening, where the impeccable Kevan Brighting, who narrates practically every step of the game, provides a bit of backstory for Stanley, a complacent office worker.
Stanley, this fern will be very important later in the story. Make sure you study it closely and remember it carefully. You won't want to miss anything.
Stanley's life is a void of monotony. He shows up every day at his job only to receive orders through his computer monitor telling him to press certain keys at certain times. This continues until Stanley eventually shuffles home, only to repeat the same excruciating tedium day after day.
He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow.
For some reason, Stanley doesn't mind his pointless life, but rather craves it. When he arrives one morning to find everyone has disappeared and he isn't receiving orders, Stanley gets paranoid and ventures out of his office cocoon to figure out what's happened.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
What comes next is a blur of surreal hilarity where the rules are always changing. The one constant is the omniscient narrator who acts as an unreliable guide. The sheer amount of things he comments on is absurd, and just when you think he's said everything there is to say, he blurts out more. It's surprising that the perpetual narration never gets tiresome, which is a credit to the game's sharp script.
And here it was, the lounge. What a room, Stanley thought to himself. What a room, what a room, what a room. This is what Stanley thought. What a room. What a room, what a room. What a room. Va-va-voom. What a room.
The script works because of how limited you are. Your only capable actions are walking, pushing buttons, and opening doors. The mechanical simplicity matches its design, which is really nothing more than a series of corridors where bits of narration trigger depending on where you go or what you interact with. But it isn't a fault. The game is constructed to remain centered on its goal, which is to provide a mirror for the player.
Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange.
What choice means in video games is the Stanley Parable's investigative focus. It mocks both how limited choices often are and how little impact they generally have. Essentially, it explores the inherent struggle between giving the player freedom while constructing a narrative. How much power do you really have when everything is predetermined? If this all sounds like highbrow rumination, don't worry. Despite having plenty of commentary, the Stanley Parable is primarily concerned with providing a good time. Plenty of jokes work well at face value and as insightful critiques. Watching a cardboard baby slowly move into a wall of flame is absurdly amusing, regardless of why it's happening.
You heartless bastard.
Depending on whether you spend a minute or 3 hours with the Stanley Parable, your impression of it will change. Just when you think you've figured it all out, the game will throw you as far off course as possible. You'll feel a bizarre motivation to uncover each of more than a dozen endings, even when the game is openly mocking you for doing so. The insults speak to a larger truth and may make you question what it means to play games at all. This introspection, however, will have you laughing the entire time.
That got a bit weird back there. Well, I'd like to apologize. Not sure where I was going with all that. You know what? I think what we need right now is a bit of music to lighten the mood. This is the story of a man named Stanley.